Can you shoot as good as you say you can?
Can you throw?
Near as far as you can shoot.
We'll find out. Get that box open.
Dude! Over here! Get ready!
Let it go.
That was a good one.
Oh, stop cackling.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio. Today we are looking at the John Wayne classic Rio Bravo. Now, I've admitted that I've been on a Western kick lately, and I wanted to watch one that I've never seen before, and that would be Rio Bravo. Now, the penultimate question is this movie as good as everyone makes it out to be, or is it simply overrated? As always, we start off by looking out at the creative team. Now, this movie was directed by Howard Hawks. Now, he directed other movies such as the original Scarface from 1932, Sergeant York with Gary Cooper, The Big Sleep with Bogey, Humphrey Bogart for those that don't know, and Rio Lobo with John Wayne. And this movie was written by three different writers. You have B.H. McCampbell, and he wrote the original short story that the movie is based on. You have Jules Furthman. Now, he wrote the original Mutiny on the Bounty. That was released in 1935. Most people know the one that came out in the 1950s that starred Marlon Brando. And there was actually a remake of that movie in the 80s starring Anthony Hopkins and Mel Gibson, simply called The Bounty. Just a fun fact. He also wrote To Have and Have Not, as well as The Big Sleep with Bogey, and Jet Pilot with John Wayne. And finally, we have Lee Brackett. Now, she was a writer on The Big Sleep with Bogey, Hatari, El Dorado, and Rio Lobo with John Wayne. And she also wrote the first draft of Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, like just before she passed away. Now let's jump into the character analysis portion of this review, and we're starting off with John Wayne as John T. Chance. He's the sheriff of the town. Essentially, he's every John Wayne Western character ever. And that's why I'm not the biggest John Wayne fan, because he pretty much plays the same character in most of his movies if you honestly think about it. Then we have Dean Martin as Dude, aka Bodachan. Now, he's one of the deputies in the town. He used to have a drinking problem. Then he kicks it. Then he goes back to it later in the movie after getting his ass handed to him at one point, and then, kicks it again and becomes the hero that the town needs, so to speak. Then we have Ricky Nelson as Colorado, and hey, I actually used to live in that state. He comes into town because of a stagecoach, and he was a part of the entourage protecting it. Chance asks him if he would help in protecting the town from the prisoners' gang, but he refuses, and he only wants to jump in and help because his boss gets killed. And essentially, he wants to track down his boss's killer, which, makes sense. Then we have Walter Brennan as Stumpy, the last of the sheriff's deputies, the oldest of the bunch, and is always left out of the gunfights for that reason. But he is involved in the final gunfight, however, as a sniper, and then as a grenadier. He starts throwing sticks of dynamite to get the gang to surrender. So basically, Stumpy is the old guy that you saw at the very beginning of this episode throwing all the dynamite. Then we have Angie Dickinson as Feathers. Now, she's the quote-unquote love interest for Chance. She starts by coming into town with the stagecoach, then is told to leave because shit's about to get real, and then refuses to leave, ultimately staying behind in the town where things inevitably go haywire. And finally, we have John Russell as Nathan Burdett. He's basically the gang leader trying to get his brother out of prison. There's nothing more to him than just that. He's the bad guy of the movie. Now let's talk about the narrative of this movie, and the narrative of this movie is rather simple. A man kills an unarmed man in a bar in front of the sheriff and one of his deputies. That man is arrested and held in jail until the U.S. Marshal arrives. The brother of the man who got arrested for murder wants to get him out. He first tries to reason with the sheriff, maybe it was self-defense. The sheriff and the deputies are maintaining that he murdered an unarmed man in cold blood. The brother hires out people to kill the sheriff and one of his deputies, but each attempt fails. The first guy was paid $50 to kill both of them, then the price jumped to $100, and when each attempt failed, the brother's getting kidnapped one of the deputies who saw the murder and wants to make a trade with the sheriff, his brother for your deputy. This leads into one big final shootout where a lot of the gang dies and a few survivors surrender, and now there's peace in the town again, yay! And yes, the narrative for a movie that goes almost 2.5 hours is legitimately that simple. Now let's take a look at how this movie was received. Now, during the research for this, I couldn't find the reception from critics at the time this movie released. Keep in mind, the movie came out in 1959, so we're only looking at the modern reception. And this movie has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 100% based on 43 critic reviews with the critics' consensus being, quote, Rio Bravo finds director Howard Hawks and his stellar ensemble cast working at peak performance, and the end result is a towering classic of the Western genre, end quote. And this movie poses an audience score of 91% based on 10,000 plus ratings, and this movie sits on IMDb at an 8 out of 10 based on 57,104 reviews. Now, for those that don't know, this movie was made as a response to High Noon at the time, according to both Howard Hawks and John Wayne. High Noon was seen as an allegory for McCarthyism and the blacklisting in Hollywood at the time, and that is a movie that I will dive into later, so stay tuned for that particular review. Hashtag shameless self-promotion. Now, I'll end the video with this. My biggest issue with this movie is it's far too long. The narrative on paper makes this movie sound like an action-packed Western through and through, but they wanted to squeeze in Colorado wanting to become a sheriff's deputy, then they wanted Feathers to be a love interest for Chance, then they wanted all of this quote-unquote slow build-up to the final shootout that simply just made the movie far too fucking long. The movie's runtime was 2 hours 21 minutes. Yes, that's how long the movie was. Had the filmmakers cut that down to an hour 40, hour 45 minutes tops, in my opinion, it would have been a better movie. There was just way too much crap in the movie that took away from the narrative that didn't need to be there at all. And this is why I'm also not the biggest John Wayne fan. Not only does he play the same character in every movie, but most of his westerns are overbloated with crap that takes away from the narrative that really shouldn't be there, in my opinion. So to answer the question from the beginning, is this a classic of the western genre, or is this simply overrated? I think you guys already could figure out the answer based on this review, but I'll say it right here. This movie was overrated as fuck. Now, I'm going to go ahead and end the review right here, because I've basically said all that needs to be said, and there's no need to drag this out any longer than it needs to be. You know, I don't want to make this review like a John Wayne Western. see what I did there? So, this is going to conclude it for this review. Thanks so much for listening to this all the way through if you stuck around this long. And I will see you guys next time.